Welcome everybody to this press conference that we called today in light of the felony charges that have been made against Elizabeth Catlin in the state of New York. We have just learned as of Thursday, a second woman has been arrested. Her name is Melissa Carmen. And it was based on this recent arrest that we felt it imperative to become a bit more proactive. The purpose of this conference today is not only in support of Elizabeth and Melissa and all of the women that choose to have the birth that they want to have, but the purpose really of the conference today is to shed light on the bigger issue. Now, Elizabeth, what's happening with Elizabeth is not just something we can look at and isolate that. There's a much, much larger issue at hand. And maternity care advocates, which I am one, my name is Linda Hamilton, by the way, we felt that this would be a good opportunity to really put some more education out to the public about what's this really all about. So that is the purpose of the conference today. And we have some amazing panelists, they'll say everything and I just will be quiet now. So I am going to first again, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming. And I am going to call on Indra I will also be putting, I just wanted a side note for the members of the press that are here. I will have an opportunity after everybody gives their statements for question and answer time. At that point, you would raise your hand and please identify who you are, and we will provide an opportunity for you to ask questions to specific panel members, or general questions as well would be fine. Until that time, I'm letting everybody control their own mute and audio settings. So please keep yourself muted so to keep the audio quality as good as possible. And I think without further ado, we're just gonna get going on this. And I will put the bios of each panelist in the chat window at the beginning of their statement. So you will have a copy of that should you want it. Okay, Indra, passing it over to you. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm honored to be here. I think this is a very important issue, so I'm glad that we are talking about it. I am the president of the Birthrights Bar Association, which is an association for lawyers and legal advocates who are particularly interested in legal issues related to childbirth. So that includes all sorts of things, but certainly how midwifery is treated in the law in the United States. I'm also the founder of Elephant Circle, which is a Colorado-based birth justice organization. So that's the background that I bring to this issue. When it comes to the law, I first want to dispel a couple myths or assumptions. Some people just assume that the law is rational, either with regard to how it's written or how it's enforced. But in fact, on this issue, that's not the case. New York State has a conflict between the law in the statute and the law in regulations. Credentialed midwives in New York State are not all equally able to practice because of the regulations, but not because of the statute. So right there is a bit of illogic. It creates a space in the law for misapplication, confusion, and problems, which is what we're seeing unfold. Also in terms of how the law is enforced. There is much discretion, that prosecutors have, that investigators have at many steps, how things are charged, how things are investigated. And it's absolutely not the case that these midwives have to be criminally charged, that they have to be charged with felonies, that they have to be investigated in the way that they have been. So I just want to make sure it's clear that in terms of the law, we dispel that myth. Not just in terms of factually understanding what's going on here, but in terms of socially how we respond to these issues. You know, especially when the criminal law is involved, folks rightly become scared, often just want to distance themselves from things having to do with criminal law, which of course is reasonable. But some of that reasonable response of distancing is really based on these assumptions that if someone has been charged with a crime, it's because they did something really wrong. And in fact, with regard to these cases, but also a lot of other cases, we can't trust that that's always true. The other myth that I want to dispel is that if something is highly regulated, it must be highly dangerous. In fact, what I found is that things that are highly regulated, what you can trust is that things that are highly regulated are highly political. It may be that sometimes those things are also highly dangerous, but what I found, especially when it comes to law related to childbirth, more often than not, the level of regulation has more to do with the politicization than to do with risks, threats, safety. So I think that to some extent begs the question, why is midwifery so political? And, you know, of course, I think the number one reason is because it involves women. And the number two reason stemming from that is because it involves reproduction, which, you know, forever is a political issue. It has everything to do with how people determine all kinds of power in society. And our society is no different. How this specific politicization has played out in the United States with regard to laws, you know, is a longer history that I could go into, but I think it's worth sketching out at least some of those pieces. It just, you know, a lot of forces in US history sort of combined to lead us where we are today. 100 years ago, most people were giving birth exactly how the women that Elizabeth and Melissa cared for are giving birth. That was the majority. Some of them attended by doctors, some of them attended by midwives, but the vast majority of them all attended at home. 100 years ago, that started to change. One of the big forces in that was the professionalization of obstetrics. You know, if you just think about this country 100 years ago, there was also still a greater population of people lived in rural areas. There was the beginning of a shift toward urbanization. There were many medical schools, but medical schools in general could be, you know, far flung. They could have their own curriculums. They were, you know, not very well coordinated. But around the 1920s, there was an effort to professionalize medicine across the board, but specifically obstetrics. And obstetrics was seen as sort of a lower level of medicine. It wasn't very well respected. Why? Partly because there were midwives. There were a lot of women doing things that obstetricians were endeavoring to do. And in order to sort of build the esteem within medicine that obstetricians wanted, they had to really distance themselves from midwifery. And so began a concerted effort to eliminate midwifery. I think that's really important to know, because what then transpires over the following 100 years that leads us to today is that politicization that I'm talking about, where the bounds of what counts as midwifery, what counts as medicine, what is legal, what is just, is really, you know, fought over. Ultimately, that resulted in more recent history to states having different laws to regulate different kinds of midwives. We have multiple credentials for midwifery in the United States, partly because of this political history. And so as a result, we have just sort of I will say in meaning generously, a mess of midwifery laws. New York State's is no different. You know, each state sort of took their own tack and resolved some of those political issues, and in some ways left some of the political issues unresolved in other ways. What it means is that different kinds of midwives are regulated differently in different states, and that also leads to essentially a lack of integration of midwifery into, you know, into culture, but also into the legal system, also into the healthcare system. The result is that it's possible to have people cared for well by competent providers who are outside of the formal legal system. And as a result, we see people being criminalized for things that don't necessarily bring greater safety to society. I also, as a staff attorney at National Advocates for Pregnant Women, work on criminal issues where pregnant people too are being criminalized, kind of on the flip side of some of these issues. So some people are charged with felonies because they've given birth by themselves. That too is an irrational response to community safety and well-being. There is certainly no indication that charging a midwife with a felony helps make society safer. But what it does indicate is it certainly exposes an unresolved issue in terms of the politics. And so I think that's where I would leave my remarks at this juncture.
Wow. You know, the only drawback to using this forum online is that we can't all be cheering you right now, because that was amazing. Just, you said so much in such a short, okay, Steph's gonna do it anyway. Yeah, let's, thank you so much, Indra. That was, I'm just amazed at how you were able to put everything that you did in such a perfect, concise way. Thank you so much. I am going to now pass the microphone to Corinna, and I will put her bio in the chat window. Okay, take it away, Corinna.
Thank you for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. I am representing Black Mamas Matter Alliance, but I'm also on the board of Bellies to Babies Foundation, which has programming for training and coalition building, working on maternal health issues. We are out of Georgia, and then also the Community Midwives National Alliance. So I've worked in women's healthcare for the last 20 years, and just last year earned my CPM as the first Black CPM recipient in Georgia to graduate in Georgia. So the most frustrating thing I feel about this situation is that reproductive rights, reproductive justice, and the framework around that, the lack of bodily autonomy for women when you start criminalizing midwives, and especially midwives that have experience, skills, and a pathway as far as education and competency. And you know, rural areas around the U.S., I believe at ACOG the ACOG Committee of Health Care for Underserved Women stated that 40% of rural areas around the U.S. are without midwives, obstetricians, and so that's contributing to the maternal death rates. I know Georgia alone being 50th ranked, we have a huge issue there. White women in rural areas in Georgia are 50% more likely to die than white women in urban areas, and and 30% for Black women. So it's really looking at the fact that everyone's seeking a solution to maternal health outcomes improving, and everyone pushing forward the different legislation and the bills to try to make it more accessible, different groups working together. Yet today in 2020, we have midwives being arrested for doing that very thing. Skilled providers who can serve these areas, who are boots on the ground, who already have the training, that are being arrested. There are several schools, recognized schools around the country who are, especially in Georgia, who are seeking to use lay people and train them to be the boots on the ground. Yet rather than looking at what other states are trying to do to fix the maternal health issues, we're arresting midwives. It really doesn't make any sense when women are dying at high rates that a midwife would be arrested with her experience, especially serving communities that not everybody is going to serve. But going back to reproductive justice and rights, these are communities and families who are choosing to use this midwife as their provider, and they have every right to do that. So I'm going to leave it with that, just around reproductive rights and the framework that asserts that all families should have access and should be able to choose who their midwife is, where they birth, who they birth with, and to be able to do that safely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karina. If you could mute your microphone, that would be great. Correct. Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you. Beautiful. Okay. Next we have Dalit, and I will let her introduce herself, and I will also post her bio in the group chat. Go ahead, Dalit.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for attending this press conference, super important, and thank you, Linda, for organizing. My name is Dalit Berazambar, and I'm the treasurer of NYCPM. NYCPM is a 501c4 organization. Our mission is to expand midwifery licensure in New York State to include the certified professional midwife as an independent practitioner. We all know, as people have mentioned before, that the maternal morbidity and mortality rate in the US, specifically New York and the 5 boroughs, is atrocious, with many counties lacking in local providers. We don't have enough providers for maternity care. This leads birth workers and communities to look outside the law to serve a community in need. We truly believe that licensing community midwives will help reduce these rates, as well as enable people to be served by midwives who look like them, who share in their cultural beliefs, and share in the same religious values. If you would like more information or to support NYCPM, which supports Liz and Melissa, please go to nycpm501c4.org, or you can visit us on Facebook at New York Friends of CPMs. As Indra mentioned, the law is okay. It's the regs that are a problem. And that's why people are being charged for no reason. And that has to change, and that's part of what we want to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dalit. Wonderful. So good hearing from you. All right, we are going to move over to Ida Dara, and I will be posting her bio in the chat window now as well. Thank you for coming, Ida. Handing the microphone to you now.
There. Thank you so much, Linda, and thank you to everyone who is on this call, who is interested in what's happening in New York and how it relates to what's going on around the country. I'm here as a representative of the North American Registry of Midwives to talk about the certification, but I also have experience for over 35 years being licensed in my state, which is Arkansas, and have been a CPM for 24 years. So a lot of experience working with regulation, with licensure, and then with the national credential. So the certified professional midwife is an expert in birth that is planned to happen in birth centers and homes. CPMs are trained specifically in providing care that nurtures and supports normal birth while providing continuous risk assessment and evaluation for birthing in out-of-hospital settings. There are 34 states plus the District of Columbia that allow CPMs to legally offer care in out-of-hospital settings. There's been a gradual increase in the numbers of states licensing midwives since the first batch of states were in the late 70s, and that list grows every year. The newest one, the District of Columbia, just passed their law last week, so it's a growing field. And not only have these licensure programs been successful for many years, but no state has sought to discontinue their licensure of maternity care providers in a state. Utilizing CPMs to provide care increases the number of maternity care providers in a state, reduces the cost of maternity care, creates very satisfied families, and creates good relationships between the midwives, the physicians, and the hospitals. To speak to the CPM credential, this credential is accredited by the National Commission on Certifying Agencies. It's the same accrediting agency that accredits the certified nurse midwife and the certified midwife credentials, both of which are already recognized in New York. The accreditation process evaluates all aspects of the development and implementation of the credential, from the governance of the organization to the requirements for the knowledge and skills for certification, to the development of the accredited exam, to the continuing education required for recertification every 3 years. The CPM credential meets all of these national standards. There are defined areas of knowledge and skill which can be obtained through a variety of on-site and online educational sources. And all education from whatever source is coordinated with a minimum of 2 years of supervised clinical training by registered preceptors. As has been mentioned, the current midwifery law in New York would allow CPMs to be licensed, but the Board of Midwifery has consistently refused to add CPMs as licensed care providers, despite multiple efforts beginning in 2003. The solution to the maternity care crisis in New York is simple. CPMs should be licensed to provide care to families seeking to birth outside of the hospital. Regardless of the laws in any state, families seek to have home and birth center births, and they seek people from their community to provide that care. Their needs can be best met with a healthcare system that licenses and regulates the midwives who are well trained to provide that care. This assures that midwives are accountable both to the family and to the state, and allows families to choose their birth setting and their birth attendant. This works all across America, and it can work for New York too. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ida. Perfect. Making things very clear. There's a lot of question about what the credentials are for CPM. So thank you. Okay, I'm going to pass the microphone over now to Salama. Are you there? You would unmute your microphone to come on. If she's still here.
Hello?
Hello,
Hello?
you're there. Okay, hi. There you are.
Hi.
So
I
wonderful.
was trying to get unmuted.
Okay, wonderful to have you. Really such an honor for you to be joining us today. I'm going to put your bio in the chat room, in the chat window here, so everyone knows what an amazing woman you are. And I will hand the microphone to you now.
Thank you so much. And I feel honored and privileged to be speaking to you all on this really, really important subject. I'm kind of nervous, so just have a little patience with me. The loss of any baby is a tragedy. We feel for the family, we feel for the community, but it's in a 25-year history for a midwife to lose a baby. I mean, unfortunately, every baby doesn't come here to stay. I think that to blame this midwife and charge all of these counts is ridiculous. We have a crisis in this country. The United States has the most educated, the most technological, the most expensive healthcare system in the world, and the worst outcomes of any industrialized nation. Our maternal mortality rate has been going up for the last 30 years. Every other industrialized nation, the maternal mortality rate has been going down. And most of these other countries do not have, their midwives are not nurses. Midwives are experts in the wide variations of normal labor. And like any bell curve, most lie in the middle, but there are outliers still within normal. The benefits of peace and quiet, undisturbed, loving attention are often not recognized or respected in a hospital setting. If fear or anxiety trigger the fight or flight reflex, releasing adrenaline and cortisol, it signals the body that it is not in a safe place for a vulnerable new life to emerge. Adrenaline then slows down or even stops the labor to allow her to get somewhere that she feels safe. Failure to progress, the most common cause of C-section. A woman who has a C-section is 5 times more likely to die after a C-section than a woman who has a normal physiologic birth. C-sections are major surgery. We have a 32% C-section rate in this country. That means that 1 in 3 women can't have a baby, $30,000 to $40,000 for a baby to be born. Something is wrong with this picture. We keep on doing more of the same things. throwing more money in the same directions, and it's not working. We must look within the community to women who are already respected, already trusted, already asked for their advice. Women who are not leaving in a couple of years when they pay off their student loans. Women who know the culture, know the family histories, and already care. That's the part that you can't teach. Instead of sending grass green graduates to gain experience and pay off their school loans on the bodies of poor and marginalized women, only to leave once they have learned something and go where the money is, it's got to change. I chair the Community Midwives National Alliance, and we are proposing a affordable, attainable route to midwifery for women who are already within the community. We see this as the future if things are going to change. You can't convince a OB resident who has $200,000 in debt to move into a rural community where there's maybe 150 births a year. There's no way that they can pay off their debts. There's no way they're going to move their family, relocate their whole family into a new situation. And I don't know, in our state, it is between 80 and 93 counties, depending on which expert you look up. We have between 80 and 93 counties that don't have anybody doing maternity care. There's no doctors, there's no OB, there's no hospital. So, and I'd like to add that I was a part of creating the NARM process. I was on the MANA board. I chaired the committee, the interim registry board that became NARM, and I was on the first NARM board. I was a subject matter expert. I tested the test, and I was promised all those years ago that the direct entry route would be left open so that people in the communities that I represent, the marginalized communities, I believe every community should have its own midwife, people they already know and already trust. So I'm speaking on behalf of the Community Midwives National Alliance and the Certified Community Midwife credential. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yes, everyone is just, this is so amazing that we're all together here and this information is getting out. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your voice. I would like to ask Wendy, is Wendy Kleckner here? Wendy? Okay, maybe she's on her way. One more time, Wendy Kleckner. Okay.
She's on the list, she's on the screen, but she's still muted.
Okay, Wendy, if you can hear us and you are there and maybe you just did not unmute your microphone. Or maybe she had to step away for a minute. Okay. Maybe we'll get her in a few minutes. So let's skip ahead. And Ida, it looks like your microphone microphone is still unmuted. If you can mute that.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. No problem. No problem. Thank you. So we have a guest today that wanted to speak to the care that she has received from Elizabeth Catlin. She would like to remain anonymous. From what I understand, she is a member of the Mennonite. She is a member of the Mennonite community. And so if you are here, if you could unmute your microphone and present your statement to the rest of us.
Am I on?
Okay, yes, we hear you. We do. We hear you. Okay, so
Okay.
great. Go ahead.
I want to start by thanking everyone who has dedicated time and money to help my friend Elizabeth Catlin. I met Liz in 2013 and she immediately became my friend. She mothered my husband and I through my difficult pregnancy as she did many of our friends. Liz made it clear from the beginning that she is not a licensed midwife. She is a birth attendant. We were totally fine with that. What was most important to us, as with all her other clients, was Liz shared our faith and our views and values that children are a blessing from God and childbirth is a miracle. The past 18 months were very hard and very upsetting. The homicide charges are the most devastating. Nobody blames Liz for the death of the baby. My community looks at it as God's will. God needed another rosebud for his beautiful bouquet. The parents of the baby state, it has been very hard. We could not grieve. We are constantly reminded that Liz is being blamed. We don't blame her. Why should someone else? The biggest concern in my community is the lack of maternity care. We have over 700 families. 4 CPMs are not enough to cover everyone. We love the privacy of our own home when giving birth. Will our home birth privileges be taken too? I want my daughters to experience the same calm, relaxed pace of a home birth someday too. Will she have that privilege? First, our much-needed, much-loved CPM, Elizabeth Catlin, was arrested, and other birth attendants are being investigated. Now there are rumors of a birthing clinic and maybe less home birth. Where is our freedom of choice? The choice of CNM, CPM, birth attendant, or doula should be ours. I personally don't look at licensing. I look for motherly care, experience, someone who will answer the phone at 2 a.m., someone who's willing to go out at all hours of the night or day and in all kinds of weather. Someone who I can call when the going gets rough and I'm sure I won't survive being pregnant one more day. That was Liz. She was my friend, mentor, confidant, and guide. My community needs her and I need her. Thank you.
Wow. Very, very powerful and beautiful. Thank you so much for calling in. Thank you so much.
Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. Beautiful. Okay, so we will now, yeah, if you could mute your microphone, that would be great.
Am I muted now?
No, just,
Okay. How do I have a phone. I'm on my phone keypad, so.
okay. I think if you maybe touch the screen, it should show a little picture of a microphone, and then you just touch that.
Yeah, I'm on a landline. I'm on a landline phone. So I
Oh,
need
you're
to
on a
touch.
landline phone. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Star 6 pass.
yeah, so I'm not sure how that would, okay, there, you got it. Whatever you did worked. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming. Greatly appreciated. Okay, I will do a call out for Wendy again. Is Wendy here? Wendy Kleckner? Okay, she's still not with us. We'll wait for her. Oh, wow. Okay. We're going to move on now. And as I stated at the beginning of the conference, there have Elizabeth. This was a very high profile and well-known case about Elizabeth and the charges against her. More recently, on Thursday to be exact, another woman, Melissa Carmen, was arrested. This has prompted us to take more action, more involvement in protecting the rights of birthing women. And I just want to make it very clear, I know so many people have said it and it was in the press release as well, but when you restrict a birthing woman, when you restrict a birth worker, what you're really doing is restricting the right of a pregnant woman to have the birth that she chooses. So Melissa, are you ready? We will have a statement both from Melissa, and then Elizabeth will be our last speaker and she will give her statement then. Melissa, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great to have you, Melissa. Thank you for dialing in, and I will give you the microphone now.
Okay. Thank you for everyone that has attended today. My statement's going to be really brief. Obviously, I was just arrested this past Thursday for unlawful practice of a profession and hindering prosecution, both counts in regards to Elizabeth's case. And I have court on March 20th. I have been in the birth world for 10 years. I have been instrumental in fighting for licensure here in New York State and am a board member of NYCPM. And what has happened with Elizabeth and what is currently happening with me and what is happening with other birth workers in New York State is a travesty, is nothing more than a modern day witch hunt. The state is not doing anything to help change the maternal morbidity and mortality rates in this state, and they're putting up huge barriers to CPMs to get licensed. It's already been mentioned that the way the law is written, we should absolutely be able to get licensed, but the way the rules and regulations are written, we no longer can get a license, which really muddies the waters on what can be done and not done by CPMs. We need everyone's support. We need support for our bill, and we need to support Elizabeth, and hopefully if people feel inclined to support me in fighting these absolutely ridiculous charges. And pretty much that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I think I speak for many people here where you have our complete support. And as much as this initiative began in supporting Elizabeth, that we support you as well now too, in every way that we can. Okay, Elizabeth, are you ready? Okay. So if everybody here, if the members of the press that are present, once Elizabeth is finished with her statement, I will give a closing statement, and then from there we will open the floor to questions. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you, Linda, and thank you everybody that's shown up and is listening and supporting. And Thank you, my dear friend, for those kind words. That I've been good friends with you and your husband for many years. My statement too is going to be very short. I won't speak to any of the nonsense that's going on right now. But I do want to say, and I really hope that we can listen to the voice of the women, not only here in New York State, but everywhere. The voice of us. We want to choose where we have our babies, and we want to choose with whom we have our babies. And I just ask that the state listens to us. And now with 2 arrests, New York State just made the maternity care crisis here in New York State that much worse. And they're not doing anything to help the situation. I beg of you all to do what you can to get in touch and let's try to resolve this situation, not only for the Mennonite communities, but also for my own daughters and my daughter-in-laws and my family and those of my friends. We desperately need to have a choice, and I think it's a good choice, and it's a better choice than what we have now. Again, I want to thank you all for the support. I work as a study coordinator for the University of Rochester, and in my work this morning, I was doing visits, and I visited one young family, and the mother said, "Why don't they listen to us? They've already written letters. They've shown up in court. They've written letters to judges, attorneys, letters to the editor, and they just want to be heard." Also, then the husband said, "Well, are we going to have to figure out how to do it on our own?" And it's not what they want, but they do want to have some choice. So thank you very much, all of you, for working towards making birth safer and more attainable for the home birth in the communities here in rural New York State. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Really appreciate you coming today and giving a public statement. Thank you. There are times I think about what's happening and I just cannot believe it. I cannot believe that we are living in a world that will do this to women, that we still do not have the autonomy over our own bodies. What we are asking for today is twofold. Number one, all charges be dropped immediately against both Elizabeth and Melissa. Second, that the law changes. Now, whatever that looks like, that's not the work that I do, so I don't know. But there are plenty of people here that do. And whatever it's going to take to change this needs to happen as soon as possible. And I will leave it at that. Okay, I will open the floor now to questions. And what I'd ask for you to do is, actually, let's just try it this way. If you have a question, just go ahead and unmute your microphone and let us know who the question is directed to, or if it's just a general question. If anybody has any questions, now would be the time.
Gwen Chamberlain, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you. Thank you.
You had indicated that this is being recorded. How
Yeah.
can we refer back to this when we need to?
Okay, I do have your contact information. So I will send a link to the recording,
Okay,
whoever requests it.
okay.
And I
I'm
will
requesting.
okay, great. I will also make it public. It shouldn't be too hard to find. And I guess, I would hope that everybody here is aware of the Facebook page that we've created to organize ourselves in support of Elizabeth and now Melissa, and of all women who choose to have the birth that they want. The name of the page is Friends of Elizabeth Catlin, and everything, any updates, any information would be on that page, and that would be the easiest, I think, to access it. Other questions?
Hi, this is Jennifer.
Okay.
Hi, I have a question for Indra. Indra, you talked about how it's not the law in New York that makes, that's brought these charges, it's the regulations. And so I'm just wondering, how are reporters supposed to talk about this in terms of legality? Is it, Liz is being charged with felonies. So is the practice of midwifery without a license in New York illegal? Or are you saying that's a myth? Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Well, the legal issue is more about what is a licensed midwife. So it's not incorrect to say that the charge of practicing midwifery without a license isn't real. It is real. In terms of the statute, these midwives, it's not clear on its face, essentially, that they would have violated the law. In order to figure out how they violated the law, you'd have to look at the regulations. So, I think I would advise journalists, go ahead and say that they've been charged with practicing midwifery without a license, but that they are credentialed, and that, that the Board of Midwifery has prohibited them from becoming licensed. Ida, do you think that's a reasonable way to put it?
Yes, I do, Indra. The law would allow the board to license CPMs. The board has chosen not to accept the CPM for licensure.
Thank you.
And Jennifer, did you want to add anything? This is Jennifer Block.
Sure, yeah. For any of the reporters on the call, just to give you some background, I've been covering this issue for about 15 years or more now, as an independent journalist and an author. I'm the author of the book Pushed, which might be a good resource. And I have a piece coming out in Long Reads very shortly I've been working on it for several months, that goes into the history of New York in particular, and how we ended up with this confusing situation for the licensing of midwives. We have we have certified midwives and certified nurse midwives who are licensed in New York, but the certified professional midwife is not. And so this is the background on this situation. I also gave birth with a CPM 6 years ago, not in New York. So I talk about that as well in my upcoming article. So it might be a good resource. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. So happy to have you join us today. Thank you for that. I look forward to reading that when that comes out. Okay, we did have a question right before Jennifer spoke up, and I'm not sure.
Can I just add to my answer? My colleague,
Yeah,
Deb,
sure.
put it in the chat box, but I'll just say it out loud as well. Just that the New York Board of Midwifery is prohibiting a class of midwives from becoming credentialed in violation of the intention of the statute and the will of the legislature, which of course represents the people of New York. Thanks, Deb.
Nice, thank you. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Okay, other questions?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, it's Beth Greenfield with Yahoo Lifestyle. I wanted to ask, it was mentioned in the press release, there was some connection made to community care and the coronavirus. And since all of our readers are 1,000% obsessed with that topic, I'm wondering if there's a way we can make that connection a little more pronounced, if it's there.
It's certainly there, most definitely there. And I can speak into that unless somebody else feels like they would rather.
I wouldn't mind talking about it. This is Melissa.
Okay, go for it, Melissa.
Yeah, so the governor of our state of New York has earmarked millions of dollars for the pursuing the coronavirus, protecting people, because we're all going to die, I guess, from it. And the worst place that a low risk, healthy woman should be is in a hospital full of sick people that could potentially have the coronavirus. So if anything, we should be promoting even more that women, best option for a safe, low-risk birth would be at home. Makes sense. So there was another part of that and I just lost it. Sorry. I don't know, I forgot. I'm sorry, I forgot the rest of it. But so basically, you know, we need to, oh, I know what the other part was. So the governor has also earmarked millions of dollars to combat or to help improve the maternal morbidity and mortality rates in New York State. So these two things would go hand in hand. So let's do that. But we need to have more midwives in the state. And the way to do that is to allow CPMs to become licensed.
And I would add to that immediately, if we're talking about emergency preparedness, this is something that should be starting now. And yeah, thank you, Melissa.
I will also add back to the community birth workers. We may be the first call that someone who's suspected with the coronavirus will call. And that's super important that we know more information. Plus, this way we can transfer information and help people get care quicker and faster. Many people call us before they call their doctor, sometimes not related to pregnancy or birth. So we would almost be first responders to symptoms kind of thing.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, questions? Are there more questions?
This is Indra. I might also just add on that. One of the big recommendations for how we can mitigate the spread is, you know, what folks are calling social distancing. And really that just fits beautifully with the model of attending people at birth in their own, you know, homes. That's essentially social distancing. Social distancing works really well for birth. So it's not like something about birth needs to be different to respond well to this potential pandemic, but it's that what already works well coincides nicely with what's needed, except for the way it's being regulated. I think it's also, I don't think we've fully made the point that it's actually CPMs that are uniquely trained in providing care in this setting. There are other credentialed midwives. They aren't required to have experience outside of hospitals, for example. And so it's really specifically these providers that we need.
I'm so glad you said that, Indra. Yes, yes, yes. They are already trained. Okay, we have a hand raised by Katie Brummel. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing.
That's okay. It's Bramhall. Hi.
Bramhall, hi. Go ahead.
I'm so blown away and intimately connected to this situation in a way. I'm a CPM for over 12 years in Vermont. And as there's a brand new Amish community across the lake in Lake Champlain, and the Elizabethtown Hospital just closed their birth center. And in Essex and Westport, they don't have anybody to take care of them anymore when they run into trouble. And so they are, you know, one of the things that we're in constant negotiation about is I with my husband and them with their neighbors is how to get them some care without having to get to Plattsburgh or across the lake. And so when they run into trouble, they call me up and I promise my husband not to get arrested. And I go across the lake and you know, drive them where they need to be, coordinate their care with them, and look at all the healthcare providers and say, I look terrible in handcuffs, please don't, I'm not here, but you've got to get some, and just negotiate their care with higher up providers. And then when they really shouldn't be birthing at home but don't want to go to a hospital, they then have to come over here and have their baby in my house. And it just, this whole issue, and it's a ridiculous state of affairs. And you know, my family gets really nervous about it, and which doesn't stop me, but I'm also on the Maternal Mortality Review Board for the state of Vermont, and we all know the state of maternal safety in regards to childbirth. It's just, you know, I'm all in, and you know, I'm grateful for this call because there's nobody to take care of them. You know, I say to people, what are they supposed to do? Take their horse and buggy up to Plattsburgh in the middle of the night? It's ridiculous. So just anything I can do. And the bigger question is that with a lack of care for our families, more and more of us are going to be getting into more and more trouble. It's just what we do without wishing to. It's unnecessary.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Katie. Other questions or comments?
This is Melissa again. Just to kind of piggyback on a couple comments that have been made that Indra just mentioned, and also earlier. Sorry about that. Is that besides not having enough providers in New York State, we also have hospitals that are closing at record rates. So where are these women supposed to go? You know, I mean, Eastern Niagara up in Lockport is closed. St. James in Hornell is closed. And there's more than a dozen counties in our state that do not have a maternity care provider and have no access to a midwife or if they do have access to a midwife, she would be practicing illegally and risks her life every single day to try to provide care to these women.
Thank you, Melissa.
I have another question.
Okay.
Gwen Chamberlain again.
Mhm.
Can anyone confirm for me that we have women from New York State who are now traveling to Pennsylvania to deliver their babies?
I can.
Okay, go ahead, Daly.
There's a certain, sorry, someone else talking?
Sorry, I can do the same.
Yeah, besides for the lack of providers in communities, right? We also have providers making choices as sort of a community to protect themselves in the eyes of the state, or because OBGYNs look down upon those choices. So certain women who may be considered high risk in certain eyes are traveling to Pennsylvania because they can't get the care that they want in New York with the licensed midwives that are there, because most likely those midwives were not trained to do certain things. And so it's not necessarily a reason to risk them out of home birth, but they're going to look for their home birth out of state because that's the care that they want. And if they walked into a hospital, they might be offered just a C-section as their only option, which isn't informed choice, isn't autonomy over their body. And so they leave and they go and find places where someone will give them the opportunity to birth the way that they want.
Great, thank you. More questions? Yes.
Yes, hello?
Hi.
Yes. You hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank
Very
you.
good. I'm technologically challenged and I'm a little bit hoarse.
No,
So,
it's great. We can hear you.
I'm with the my name is Mike Hibbard. I'm with the Finger Lakes Times newspaper in Geneva. I'm covering Elizabeth's case. My first question is for Melissa. I was not aware of that arrest, or if it's in our view or our readership area. I was hoping Melissa could tell me what part of the state she is from.
I'm from Belfast, New York, but Mark Eifert, the state police, sent out a press release today to all of the local papers.
Thank you. My second question is for Elizabeth, if she's still there. And I'm guessing she may not be there anymore. So.
I am here. I'm just not sure that I can answer any questions.
Okay.
So Elizabeth, let's go ahead and let's have him ask his question and then make the decision from there. If you're okay.
Sure. Yep.
Understood. Understood. You mentioned you weren't going to discuss the nonsense, and I'm taking by that you're not going to discuss specifics of your case.
Correct. Yeah, that might have been an unfortunate word to use, but it's how I'm feeling right now for Melissa as well. It just seems like she said, a witch hunt.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth and Melissa. More questions? Any more questions? Okay, I don't see any more hands. I'll give just one more call out if there are any more questions. Okay, I think we're good. Well, I thank you all. As I said before, we will publish the recording of this conference on the Facebook page, and you can access it there. And yeah, just to stay in touch if there's anything you feel that you could do in this ongoing case and initiative to support Elizabeth and Melissa. Please let us know through the Facebook page. Thank you so much. The conference is now over.
Thank you.